Okay, hello, I'm with Dyrus.
Uh,
Okay, I'm going to do one of my grilled interviews with him here where I kind of go into his career, some people he played with, some things I found during my research. And so, actually, the place I wanted to start with you is like basically right at the beginning of your like pro career almost, because you were one of the players who actually took part in the first season one championship of well, Riot Season 1 Championship, basically. And the interesting thing I found when I looked back was everyone remembers, okay, so Fnatic won that tournament, it was like a surprise, and then AAA, Against All Authority, I think came second, this French team. But actually, during the group stage of that tournament, your team, Epic, beat both of those teams in the group stage. But then eventually you came like fourth overall. So, I mean, what do you look back on that tournament as like, we could have won the whole thing?
yes, we could have won the whole thing very, very easily, but usually when I lose, I didn't know much back then. When you say stuff, people look at it as excuses, or they look at it as, oh, Europe's the best this season, and all that. And when I look back on it, it was our first LAN, possibly everyone else's first LAN. We were a casual team. We were put together 2 weeks before the qualifiers, and we ended up beating CLG, and we lost against TSM. So we came second in North American qualifiers. And for a team that was just made 2 weeks before like anything, like I just played casually, like we just messed around, just picked whatever we want. We were pretty good, and as time went on throughout the year of Epic Gamer, we still took second place consecutively without any practice at all.
Okay, that's interesting because that's actually what I wanted to talk about next. Was that, I mean, you're saying there Epic was like kind of a casual team, like you weren't trying to be like full-time pro like some of these other teams were. But the interesting thing I noticed, like the cycle while you were in Epic was that you got a lot of like second or third places. And what would often happen was the team who stopped you in the one tournament, and like in the final, the team who beat you, in the next tournament you'd beat them, but then some other team had beat you in the final. So it's like you were always being denied just before you won the tournament. How do you think back on that Epic period? I mean, since you're saying it's casual, was it not a problem that you kept coming second so many times, and like you were kind of unfortunate with the people that you happened to meet in the finals, etc.? How do you look back on it now?
For us as a team, we didn't really look at the defeat as a big deal, because if we're like, oh, we get to play in this, oh, we get to, do whatever we want. Some of us were in school. I was just doing whatever in Hawaii. Our leader, Dan, he's kind of the opposite of Reginald. He's very passive. He's very responsible, but as for like signing up for tournaments like IEM New York or any other tournaments, like I don't know who would sign up for what. We didn't really have anyone to manage that. And also, every time we went for a qualifier after we missed our chance, West Rice would be in Canada with his girlfriend, and we got disqualified for one round because he didn't have the tournament client downloaded. For Salsi, one time he wanted to go play volleyball with girls, and another time we got DDoSed, and another time we got DDoSed again. And I'd actually like to come back on the topic of DreamHack, because it's something that I really wanted to express myself for a while. And it's been so long, I don't think anyone would find it offensive by now. But back then, after we went 3-0, we were so happy. Double F was famous for his face checking, and I was forced to either play support, AD, or top, and we never had a specific role, which played a big part in the team. Our communication was very bad. For example, Dan would be yelling, "Follow me," and no one else would be listening. Everyone would be farming, doing their own thing. And he would be yelling so loud that the team on the other side could hear through the soundproof headset. And when I looked at that, I was a support, and I was the only one who followed Dan, and I looked back, and it was just really sad, because West Rice and Double F would be tunnel visioning, and we just throw the game. Usually the times when I did get top lane or AD, we generally did usually win most of the time, but back then I was just happy to be there. I wasn't so passionate to like be in the top lane role or AD role, but when we lost, I felt like really, really sad, and I felt like we could have easily won it.
So when you think of the Epic team overall, I mean, that was the interesting thing. You're saying like there wasn't even necessarily any management behind the scenes, like things were, it sounded a bit chaotic even in game and out of the game. And yet you had all these placings where you were coming top 2, top 3, and yet at the time, on paper, the top 2 or 3 teams were supposed to be these more professional teams or the bigger names, you know, CLG, TSM, etc. So was your team really like legitimately like top 2 at the time? Do you think of yourselves as that level? Like, were you cocky? Did you think you were this good? Better than the pro teams, I mean?
We actually had no idea until the day we 3-0'd. I felt like, wow, we were probably the best because TSM's in the other group and they made it through. And we scrimmed against them a lot and we made them better and they made us better. But then when we played against them, like, we just fell short in team composition and experience. We had no experience and no, like, real leader to follow because Dan wasn't really that strict about it, which there's good and bad sides about it, but since we weren't really strict, we couldn't really go anywhere. Same thing for WCG 2010 when I was working. I was actually listed as a sub for the team. I felt like if I played with them at that time, we would have won that too, but I was just like there. But I got like 3 riot points just for being a sub, so it was not so bad.
Actually, that goes on to my next topic, because coming into the period when you joined TSM, just before you had that WCG where you went with the mixed team and it was all the Americans and you won the gold.
Yeah, that was the next WCG.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay. So going just before you joined TSM though, it was like the one a few months before. Mm-hmm. How much do you think of you actually getting to join TSM? Do you think that had any role in playing it? Because I mean, you played along with Reginald, etc., in that team, and a few of those guys who were in your team now, X-Special. Was it the fact that you were kind of beating some of them at lands before? What do you think played into them bringing you in instead of Rain Man?
When I was back in Hawaii, Chaox wanted a roommate. So I was in their Ventrilo once, and we were just being friendly. It was like, oh, Chaox needs a roommate. You know, do you want to come and join the gaming house? And from that, I was just there streaming, playing, and playing with them in WCG. I was just on the team. You know, I just tried to do my job. When we played against Dignitas back then, it was probably the hardest matches of our lives because I was still casual and they were on a different level. And you know, I still did my job. I had my moments, but back then, season 1 and coming up to season 2, no one was as serious as they were today because I didn't know how far it was going to go. Season 2, like when we were playing, we were on our winning streak when I joined TSM, I had my debut. COG went to Korea and then to train, and we beat them anyways, even after they had all that time. I can honestly say that like the serious level, like even though we were in a gaming house, like there's always something that could have been done better. And now that time's passed, we finally kind of see what we really, really need to do.
In terms of the North American top lane players, it feels like despite all the wins that you've had in North America with TSM, sometimes maybe you get overlooked because, I mean, if you look at the time period when you joined TSM, that was sort of after the period when everyone was looking at Hotshot like, oh, he's the best top laner, he's amazing. Then when you joined TSM was when people actually started to focus more on Voyboy when he was in Dignitas, like, oh, he's amazing, and then he joined CLG, etc. And so it feels like you kind of fell between the two. Do you think there was a period when you, like, I mean, are you now the best top laner in North America? Was there a period where you really thought, like, I'm definitely the best?
There was definitely a period when I thought I was the best in Season 2 because the Curve, CLG, and Dignitas had this triple switch going around. There's not that much synergy. I played pretty frequently, but I've never had anyone really look up to. And how I became the best in the first place is I get to play against all these great top laners. I get to play, like when I was back at the gaming house in Lindenhurst, I played on the Europe West server, and I found that European top laners are the real deal, along with Korean top laners, but I never got a chance to play him. I made a Korean account. I wanted to go and play him because how you really, really get good at the game is not only the players that are the best players. Like if you look at Shy, you look at McNoon, you look at Expression, you look at all the good top laners. Like I know I missed a lot, but the players around them are what made them really, really good. They're not natural-born geniuses. McNoon, he used to play in the North American server Season 1, and we'd play against each other. He'd be top rank, you know, I'd just be playing for fun. All these other top laners and in the area or whoever I played is what made me to be the best at that time. Right now, the main top laners I'm looking to play against and compare myself in North America is mainly Voyboy and Kiwi Kid. For the rest, they have their very strong traits, and they have like their main heroes, and they can play very well. But I feel like the biggest difference is the experience and their nerve coming into the game. So far, the only one who's been to prove himself with having that iron grit and nerve that's been coming up is Kiwi Kid, and they have the team to do it, and they're looking very strong. As for Voyboy, he's very, very, very strong top laner too, and I can't slack off against him. Usually, how I play, how I train myself is I just gotta like play certain heroes over and over, because every time I go into a tournament scenario, I find myself in these unfamiliar like surroundings and unfamiliar like situations, like their junglers like diving me, or I'm getting pressured too hard, and this was like a while ago. Now I have more of a clear mind to see what I really need to do, and it's still kind of hard to be the best, because I can like copy from the best and get to their level again, but I'll never have a constant like practice that I've had before, or well, I didn't really have that before, but everyone else kind of got better. Before, I've said like back then, like American teams were okay, but I think the triple sub switch made North America very weak.
What do you think that is?
Because they're not with their main teams anymore. Like Saint made CLG very strong, Voyboy made Dig very strong, and Crumbs made Dig very strong also. Crumbs is a very top line jungler, but moving him to top lane was kind of okay, but it kind of took away from his best role.
So I mean, from your perspective, just to cut in a bit, if they'd have not done the triple switch, let's say they all stayed with their original teams, you think those teams would have been stronger?
I definitely think those teams would have been stronger. Like the downtime between that, like all the teams were definitely weaker at that time. And for us, we would practice hard before tournaments, but there's been nobody like, M5 Rose in Europe. There's all the Korean teams that are really, really good. They practice very hard. They study, they copy from the best, and then they make their own strategies. So for that, we're kind of just seeing who's on the top, and we're just trying to get down our mechanics, get our champion pulled to a certain level again, and see what we can do, and see what's the best, see what we can cheese, see what we can play solidly. What plays a huge part in all of this, though, is experience, and we all definitely have the experience, and like we've all played together long enough, and I think we can really pull it off this year.
Well, that's interesting, because obviously, I mean, when I looked at your results in 2012, an obvious topic to talk about was the fact that amongst the North American teams, your team was just dominating. I mean, you won like, I think, 4 LANs. You were nearly always the top list North American team, at least until the last sort of third of the year when like more Asian teams were coming to events. And so, I mean, on one hand, people would say, well, since you won all these LANs, like you were dominating so hard compared to the North Americans, like, I mean, is there a degree to which it's what you were saying in this last answer here then? You think like the gamble of all these teams trying to like get a better player by moving up someone around from another team, you think that a degree of it's because they all weakened themselves, and this is why you guys like stuck with the same 5 and you were able to dominate them?
It's kind of hard to say, but no matter how I feel about it, how you look at it, they definitely like got weaker. If we would lose, is another topic, because I felt like we were very strong. If we lost, I felt like we would try and get better. What a lot of top teams did in America, like America's been on top for a long time, and that isn't because Europeans couldn't participate in it or Asians couldn't participate, or the Chinese teams. Like these Chinese teams, these Korean teams, they've been playing since the start. They've been playing on the American server, and after they get to the top of solo queue with like 180 ping or something, then they go to their own server and they start doing their own stuff, and we don't know what they're doing.
So I mean, does that essentially mean, okay, so I've heard this popular thing people promulgate, which is the idea that, NA was on top at the beginning because it was all the NA server, then Europe came along, and then, like Korea, that's like how people think of it, that it was just the servers being added. But you're saying like it was actually something to do with the playstyle of the NA teams, or what was it that was making NA on top, do you think then?
NA was on top then because we got the game first, basically. Like, there's no reason for us to be behind of teams that got the game like a year or a month later. But after a certain amount of time, there's only so much you can learn by yourself, and there wasn't as much innovation in North American competitive play. People think that North American like just copies stuff because us as TSM, we see something strong, we're just going to use it, and lots of North American solo queuers, they do lots of them have the potential to be really good because all we do is play solo queue at that time. And how we got good or how we hardened our mechanics was from them. There are certain players on North America that bring out all these different things, like before Hecarim started to be popular, before even Nasus jungle would be popular. There are other players that do that, do double bruiser bot or 2 versus 1 mid against Cass. Like, that's always been there. But people are too afraid to bring it out in competitive play, or I don't know, it's just how it is for now.
If we look at, when I looked at a lot of different threads about you as a player or TSM towards the last sort of 4 months of 2012, when your team was still like the best North American team, like versus NA teams, you were still crushing them, but then you had this terrible streak against like Asian teams you were doing really badly, and then with the European teams, it was sort of like 50-50, maybe you'd get a win here or there, but they'd beat you as well. And so, strangely, you had this scenario where against all the NA teams, your team was doing great, but then people would look for, okay, what's wrong with TSM though when they're losing to these Asian and these European teams? And I noticed that your name actually came up a lot and you would get a lot of criticism. People would say like, you weren't doing too well versus some of the tops from Europe or Asia or whatever. Trying to balance it out for me, when you think back on 2012, like how much of you coming into TSM, you individually, was part of them going on this great run and being great against North American teams? And how much were you at all, I don't want to say to blame, but how much did you have to do with TSM not being so good against the Asian and certain European teams?
As if for the American teams, I've been playing the game since the start, and I see all these other top laners. Before I got into like very, very competitive play compared to casual on EG, like I see all these top laners, and I see like, oh, Hotshot's the best and all that, and I look at that and I'm like, even before McNoon or the Koreans were known to be good, like I know there's Korean top laners that are better than him. I know there's European top laners like Wicked, like playing against Wicked like up to my level back then.
What kind of time period are we talking about?
We're talking about when we're in Lindenhurst coming into it. As I started to join the team, a little bit after I joined the team, we practiced against Europeans. That definitely gave us an edge on the other North Americans. But one of the biggest factors is like you don't know what the other team's going to do. And when we had that bad streak against Azubu Blaze, they implemented this push strategy, and these are all players that used to play on NA that we play with evenly in solo queue. So like them beating us this badly, and we don't know what they play, is not as big a surprise as it was. But what it did was it motivated me very much. And we, even after losing to them, like 0-3 on the first day, we 3-0'd the 2 other teams in that tournament by taking their strategy and putting it to work. And I feel like our downfall was we didn't keep it. Like, we got so complacent that, like, oh, this pushing strategy, oh, it's just cheesy. Because then when we did it, it's like, oh my God, the game's so easy, we just did what they did. But I don't know if we ever took the time to study it and, like, make it our own. And they kind of still have it as their own for the pushing. Like, I've never done that pushing strat ever since then. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is really, really fun. It was beautiful play. Like, this is the first time in League of Legends I felt so challenged, and it was just beautiful play where I can't just get away with playing any champion I want and just, like, slacking off with, like, Yorick, because that was actually really, really bad with Yorick. And I never played, when I played Malphite the tournament, I never really played Malphite that much. He's just always good. I'll play him. If I played, back then I played like 15 different champions whenever I wanted, and that made me complacent, so I just needed to focus on 4, which is what I'm going to start doing now, because when I saw Shy from Azubu Frost play, his Cinch play was motivated or inspired by me, but he made it into his own. He made his own build. And I saw that, and it made me realize a lot of things about my own play, and that I can't spread out too much. because there's always going to be these players that have these champions mastered. And I even talked to McNoon about it, where you have to have 3 or 4 champions prepared at the very least. By not spreading out so much, I can play like solidly and play like perfectly to a certain extent. When I picked up Darius for World Champions against Jace, I actually wanted to like camp the lane because we had Shyvana, and the thing about Darius is that you can, every time Jace goes for CS, you can pull him and chunk him really hard. And people back then, they thought that, oh, I counterpicked myself, and just because I beat West Rice with Jace and against his Darius doesn't mean that it was a hard counter when I said back then. It's because of the player's experience playing these heroes. Back then when I played Jace at Worlds or before that, I wasn't even that good. He was just very strong and no one knew about him. Back then, Season 1, when I played Vayne for Epic Gamer, like that was like my first time playing Vayne. She was just really OP back then. So like, it made me realize that mastery is so very important. And one of the other top laners, Wings of Death, who is also a top lane player that doesn't really want to play competitive play, he's like, mastery is so important. Like, you've seen Froggen play Lee Sin like thousands and thousands of times. That's something I should have realized long ago. And since we were just winning so much, I got so complacent. But once again, once we played Azubu Blaze, I was just happy. Like, they're like pushing up, taking our buffs, contesting for every buff. So that's how the game should be. And no one really did that against us. So when we just played, we just beat them in lane. And, you know, we learned team fighting through scrimming COG EU more. Or we just had a certain comp, we just did the same thing every time. Vlad Kennen after Asher would just go in. Or Karthus would be like a one-man team comp. Like, there's just so many factors that were like looked over or being complacent for, or, you know, all these different factors that build into like why things are how they are.
I mean, listening to what you're saying there and some of the results, I mean, it does seem as though there's a component of the 2012 results where, because you guys were always beating the NA teams and you mainly only played the NA tournaments basically in 2012, you were kind of in a situation where you weren't kind of forced to change your style or to adapt to a new style because you would always beat these other teams. And so then you get this weird scenario where I remember seeing an interview with Reginald just before Season 2, I think it was, the finals, and he actually said that up until that point, your team had never bothered like looking up Korean teams or like studying foreign opponents in that sense, but that for the Season 2 finals, now you'd finally like taken it on board and you were looking at VODs of Frost and this and whatnot. Was it really the case that your team only, like based on what you were saying there, was your team really only like just only focusing on your own style of play and just doing a similar thing each time?
Towards the end of that season, we kind of looked at M5 a little bit because they were being very successful, and right now they're a strong team today. Back then, we didn't really look at other teams that much, like other like Korean teams. Like, we'd watch a match and we see something like Nashor's 2 on Jax, which actually turned out to be very good. I saw like Executioner's Blade on Jax. If I watched a Korean game, I'd be like, Executioner's Blade. Like, no one builds that, and for good reason. So when I see things like that, I see it as, oh, these guys aren't even up to our level yet because of these items. But like, after a couple of months or for the whole season, like, they finally they got really, really good very fast because you can see that they really, really wanted to be the best. Because you see, like, I remember at Kiev, or when it was Azubu Frost versus Gambit Gaming, or Azubu, or not Azubu. Yeah, this recent one. It's not Azubu, it's CJ Entus Frost and CJ Entus Blaze. You can see how humble they are. And, you know, really, I've met some of them. They're really, really great guys. And you can see the pure motivation, like, even from McNoon, that they want to be the best. They don't want to be on the bottom. And I could tell that they studied how we were. Like, we never studied. They study every aspect. They had a coach. Korean esports has been there for years and years, like StarCraft. It's the same concept for League, except you got 5 players. And I even read an analysis recently on Reddit where this guy is like, TPA has 6 players, not 5, because there's 6 players, the coach implements strategies. We don't have someone like that. And having a manager, like we actually had Jonas as a manager early on, and that's how we got really good really fast, because he was baking foods for us, we're looking over strategies and stuff, and then that's when my debut came. And that's when we realized that we can be the best in North America at that time, very easily, as long as I did my job. Because how I saw TSM before was that, like, I see like certain parts of them do so good. Everyone just needs to do their job. And when I joined them, I just did my job and just let the team carry. So that's why you see sayings like, as long as Darius loses lane, we win game, or as long as Darius doesn't feed, we win the game. And I've never really had any huge challenge. I never really had to call my jungler top like as much to like shut this guy down or come and take him out. But when you look at like top lane Koreans or top lane Chinese players like Stanley, Shy, McNoon, Expression, like they have the insight. They have like that sixth sense when someone's going to gank them. They like look at the map. They calculate it. They look at their next step. I've never really been forced to look at that next step as much. So, and also I had this other thing in me when I played Worlds that I felt like I needed to play phenomenally. I needed to carry super hard. So I overextended. I did this. I taunted the enemy. You know, I laughed in game. I expected Oddwin to come and back me up, but we fell short. And then I realized, oh, I just need to farm. There's only so much I can do till the point where it is my time. And the Koreans and the Chinese players, they know when to use their summoners, when to use their ultimates. Like, there's a big difference. If you're sitting in your lane with your old Ignite flash up for a long time just farming, you're not contributing, you're not adding pressure. And that's why Singe is so popular right now also, because I labeled Singe as easy to shut down because back then, like, I'd be, oh, damn, Rumble. Like, I don't know how to deal with this. But when I see Shy play, he's like, you apply pressure on the map, even if you die. You apply a lot of pressure on the map where it makes it easier on your team. Your team can do whatever they want. And he's mastered that up to the point where he knows when to back, when to go forward, and something like that's really, really important for play. And I thought that kind of mastery died out long ago. I thought it was the months and years of the team comps, but by seeing that, he re-inspired me and motivated me to start playing Singed again. And after we finally lost to Dignitas and KiwiCode played Singe, it's like, can I play Singe now? Because it's not only that I don't play these champions because I think they're not that good. I don't play certain champions because, like, oh, this is what we play, this is what works. I won't name who, but some members on our team thought Singe wasn't that good. Now they realize, oh my god, Singe is OP. Or some of them kind of knew, but they're like, oh, he does no damage. But that's not what's important. There are still, since I've played Singe so long, I know exactly how to shut him down, and I know what to do against him. So I wasn't ever too worried about playing against Singe, but since the 1 vs 2 meta has came into North America, when Koreans brought it in, the whole like mental process has changed for what I need to do. I can't shut down Singe if I'm 1 vs 2ing, and Singe just like full farms waves. Like after like both of us have no farm, it doesn't matter because then he'll just still run and be annoying. And it's just Singed.
What's interesting is what you're saying there about the idea of mastery, but trying to just master only like say 3 or 4 champions. Well, when I've looked at like the general styles that a lot of the top players used, obviously in the early days you had a lot of players who were very famous for 1 or 2 champions. So they were so famous that it kind of backfired on them because then everyone just banned it against them or something like this. And I've also noticed that a lot of the North American teams especially, it sounds like they get into all these weird scenarios where they lose a big game, and they say, oh, well, see, I picked this character and I thought it was going to work, like I hadn't used it that much and it didn't work out. So it sounds like they were going the other way, the extreme, trying to always have some like surprise that the other guy couldn't expect. But I mean, you look in a lot of sports, and usually the teams who are the best, you kind of know what they're going to do, but they're going to out-execute you. Like, it doesn't matter if you know to some degree because they're so very good at it. Do you think this is kind of the new way to play, like from what you've seen of these players like Shy? Like, you have to just be like the best at 4 characters. Instead of going to like 10 and being a bit weak, be 4 in the sense that then they can't ban them all, you know, and you're going to have some. Is this like the new mindset? Do other people share this?
That is an excellent question, and no one's really talked about that much except, well, me and Wings. Like, me between him, I don't know how other players feel, but you want to play a character enough to force the other team to ban it, because if they're forcing a ban, then your team can play whatever they want. By mastering for me, my downfall was no one really banned Singe that much against me because I didn't make them respect it. And now my goal is to make people respect my champions. I had my only respected champions were Vlad because he's very, very strong back then, and now people finally found a way to play against him. Olaf, he was very, very strong, but I didn't realize how strong he was. Kind of wish I played him at Worlds, but you know, that's done and past. Olaf was banned against me because I had these comfortable champions. Just mainly you want to have those champions, enough champions for your team comp, and enough champions, or at least like a minimum amount of champions, so the other teams see it as a huge threat and force them to ban certain champions. What these upcoming teams have that I notice is I don't see much of those champions other than the usual OPs like Elise or Kale. And some of these champions we actually have to ban out because I don't learn them, like Elise and Akali. I've been trying to learn them, but there's just playing style I have to like rebuild from ground up, or ground zero basically.
In terms of the North American mindset, I mean, when we think of like just the idea of playing your lane, only thinking about you and the other top guy that you're facing against. My background is in Counter-Strike, and this was also a 5v5 game. It's also a game where really team play was like the essential thing that won you the game. But at the same time, I noticed a lot of the North American players had this mindset of they would only think about their own score in the game. They would be very individually focused. And so even the way teams were designed, they'd often just put like the best player like off in a corner, like, okay, he does whatever he wants and we'd play around him. But then he would think like, no, it's just about what I do in the game. And I've noticed from when I looked at interviews of North American players who played the top lane, a lot of them are you always hear them talking about like 1v1, like, oh, I could out 1v1 anyone, or I would have won that, but they 2v1'd me there. And it's like, they're almost obsessed with the idea that in their perfect world, everyone would just play top lane 1v1 and you'd just outskill that guy and you'd win the lane and then, you know, everyone else can take care of their lane. But you've seen a lot of these Asian teams especially, like, they're very focused on if they're playing a specific opponent, like, no, let's 2v1 this guy early and just take him out of his game and pressure him in a certain way. Do you see this as like the NA mindset, like a flaw of it or whatever? Is it something that you as a team have had to adjust to? What do you think?
I don't think it's the NA mindset. I definitely think it's the personalities of each player. For me, when I was playing casual and I joined TSM, I was like, all right, guys, I can play this, this, and this. What do you guys want me to play? I'll play whatever's best for the team. And Chaos was kind of the theory crafter and was like, all right, I'll play this hero and I'll do my job here. For me, it was never about winning the 1v1. It was never about me like carrying the team ever. Usually who carried the team was Reginald, because if he does good, then we're like, oh, okay, this game's easy because Reginald's going to carry. Because back then, Reginald was like, I want to be the best, like after a certain point, and he did become the best. But now, like all the players are getting better. You can't just win through individual play alone. As a team, you have to devise certain strategies. Like you can see all these great players in certain teams, like Stanley, like, oh my God, Stanley carries the game so hard. But it's also dependent on how good the other team does. If they make mistakes, then you're just going to capitalize on it. And playing as a team and recognizing these mistakes, having shot callers, having all these factors put in together, it's definitely not the NA mindset. It's just the certain players. And it just so happens that those players just ended up on the NA teams for those kinds of things. Because if it was actually up to me, I'd probably have some comps like based around my hero, but that would be for the better of the team. There's a lot of times where I pick a certain hero, whatever is best for the team, and then like sometimes I just first pick it. So I'm like, all right, guys, you can just counter pick them, and you know I'll make what I can out of it. Now that there's 1 versus 2, I can do that more. I can be like, all right, guys, it doesn't matter what I play. If they counter me, I'll just go bot, and this hero's good at 2 versus 1. There's been a lot of scenarios where I pick something and it won't synergize that well, and that's something we've fixed, like after countless games where it's like, oh my God, this team comp sucks. We have no CC, we have no tank, we have no damage, and that's happened a lot even after playing so long because the meta is changing every day and every week. So now when we go into it, we kind of look at certain comps and whatever works well against what. And Korean teams and Chinese teams, they do it very well. They study their replays, probably every replay. They study other teams and they just make a masterpiece out of it. For example, like the old Azubu Blazes pushing comp. And all these strategies are sometimes made by one player or two players or the coach. For example, Reaper was on Zubu Blaze, and now he has his own team. He was the one that like made his team really, really good. He taught them, but I've been told that his team doesn't listen to him that much anymore. So that's why I feel like they're not doing as good as they could be. These individual players that innovate and do their own thing, and they know what's strong because they've been playing since the start. Also, Reaper's been there from the start. Every time I get on a certain person's team, like there's even a player that's #1 in Korea for ranked ladder, a Lilac. I'd get on his team all the time, and we'd always lose together because it's like some curse. But all these players, the ones that are really, really in the know, they can really make these team comps and their team's the best. And it doesn't really matter what region. It kind of depends on the region, but also the culture. And in NA, you kind of just, you sleep, you show up to practice, and then you go to sleep. For Korea and China, I've been told it's like you play all day and you play so much, you just drill your mind into the game, and there's just different styles and different personalities. I've noticed some more humble personalities among the Koreans. So like, it depends a lot on the culture too. That's how I feel for that.
When you were talking there about like the differences between the two cultures, like the West and the East, and also like the idea of having like one shot caller who like in the game, like his word goes essentially, like that's actually a difference I've noticed between the two different cultures, is that in Korea and Asia in general, they have a very hierarchical structure in their society. Like every person in every relationship actually knows like who has the authority in this relationship. And there's like certain rules built into their culture like that. And so you see it in their teams. Like, I mean, a good example is you mentioned Reaper there. After SK Telecom won that IEM event, I'm sure you saw this like famous chat that came out where it showed what Reaper was saying to some of his teammates in game, and he was just sort of like ordering them around almost like pawns on a chessboard, like he was just telling them, go here, go here, go here, and they would just all essentially listen to what he said. But if you look in the West, we all want to be like the individual who has his say, and everyone has to listen to what I have to say as well. I want to have an input in the tactics and stuff, and you do kind of, it seems to me at least, like you see that in some of the teams. They want to be more democratic, or in game, it's more like, can we do this now? Like, should we do this now? As opposed to like one guy, like, do it now. Right. And so what I wanted to know is this, are there pros and cons to each of them, or is it the case that like NA teams need to have like a set caller? Because I know even CLG's had this problem.
This has been a problem for the beginning of League of Legends time. The reason why TSM was also so successful is because before they were super successful, Chaox and Reginald would kind of make the calls and they'd argue a lot. There's a time where I tried to make calls and it would be good up to a point, but if I made a bad call, it's like, all right, let's stop listening to Dyrus. For me personally, I'm very good at making calls in solo queue because there's not as much pressure, but why TSM I don't know too much about the other North American teams and them making their calls. Reginald was the shot caller, and the other reason why if we did so good was because he did it so good is because he is a shot caller. If he did bad, he'd be demotivated and we'd start losing because he wouldn't be making the calls. And from that alone, you can kind of understand the whole perspective for us. Since then, Reggie is not only was the shot caller, but he was also the manager, the owner of the team. And sometimes when he made bad calls, we were kind of trying to talk it into him, but in the end, he's the boss too. So sometimes there's him being the boss that gets in the way, or sometimes we can't really argue that, or if we did, then it would be a very long argument, like 6-hour argument, and I've sat through it and I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is so dumb. This is such a waste of time. And since then, Reggie's mellowed out a lot. I'm sure he's learned a lot over the years. We've all learned a lot over the years. I would very much like it if one of us makes all the calls. It's very, very easy to follow. Because what it does is when we have this dichromatic, this kind of like call system where everyone's like, can we do this? That delays it by like extra 10 seconds or 0.5 seconds. When you have to make split second decisions, all that plays in. And when you just listen to one person, you either lose as a team or you win as a team. But right now, we've been playing so long together that we're kind of already used to it. It's kind of better, but I feel like it would be better if like one person makes the call. And there's been lots of instances where one person's like, let's just do this. And if we thought if it was wrong, then we'll be like, hey, I don't think this is the best idea. And you start suggesting. So as we do it, it's like, okay, you're right. So the other good thing about the system of how we make calls is if that one person's making a call and we all realize, oh, this is a really, really bad idea, let's back out, we can change that. But what we kind of lose for it is the instant decision making and going all hard in. Because back then it was, for a lot of teams, even nowadays, like 3 people make a decision, 2 people will go the other way. Our most recent biggest example was against Najin Sword, Mac Noon's team, or was it, I think it was Shield, not too sure. At the last MOG Dallas, I played Shin. We knew 4 of them was in the top tri-brush, and 1 of them was bot. And we were like, all right, you guys are all going to go in from this angle, and I'm going to go in from the top, tank as much as I can, and Shen will back in. But what happened was 2 of them went this way, and 2 of them went this way. So when I tanked them all and ran in and went this way, there's only 2 people here, and 2 people over here. So, like, we lost a 4-on-5, and I had Shen ult. And, like, when I see stuff like that, I just died inside. I was like, this is ridiculous. Even though we didn't practice as much after Worlds because we're kind of sad and all that, like, that level of play and communication, that's just straight up ridiculous. But back then, I didn't really have much to say. I was in a really, really dark time back then. I wasn't used to losing that much because we won so much. So when I said stuff like, oh, Reginald had his computer on vertical sync, so he was missing a lot of Karthus queues, and it would have potentially won us the game. But when people see that, they're like, oh, there's excuses. And in theory, I guess we should know better to turn it off. I'm very, very passionate about League of Legends, so when I lose, I get very, very upset, and sometimes I do things I shouldn't be doing. Even for interviews now, like, I say stupid things, like, now I kind of learned from back then to, like, control what I say. Before it was like, oh, it's all for the interview. Now I'm kind of like, okay, this is what I can and can't say. Just lots of things I've learned over the years.
In terms of your individual matchup when you play in the top lane, like I mentioned before, you were one of the people when TSM wasn't doing well against Asian teams, etc. You were one of the people who got scrutinized by the community, like, oh, he's not playing his role well enough, or he's part of the reason why they're losing. But what I wanted to ask you was, okay, so a lot of these Asian teams, if we actually think of some of the ones, like even some of the players we've mentioned so far, so Reaperd, Macnoon, Shy, a lot of these players are either like the focal point of their team at the top, or they're like one of the focal points at the very least. And so they're amazing players, but they're also getting a lot of help at certain times. A lot of the team's built around them having success in their lane. So if they play against you, for example, in theory, they're more primed to be successful against you, whereas other parts of your team are the focal points. How would you evaluate taking that into account? How much were you outplayed by some of these amazing Asian top players, and how much was it that you were doing very well, but your team isn't set up that way? Like, what's the balance, do you think?
For the balance for that, last time I can remember, when I played against Macnoon, it was 1 versus 2. I was actually doing well in the 1 versus 2. We were kind of even, but when we 1 versus 1 and I was Rumble, it wasn't really a big thing, but he was able to CS, and he actually walked up to auto-attack me a bunch of times, and that's something you don't really do on Malphite. I went health per level. A lot of these times it's just setups that decides the lane, and I had health per level instead of armor because he auto-attacked me so much, and Rumble early on can't really do much. So when people see that, they're like, oh, wow, he counter-picked him and he still lost. And with Malphite, you kind of can just farm no matter what. That game, their jungler was 3-0 before he came top, and he killed me top with Berserker Greaves, and he killed me with unexpected damage, and that set me back. So for that game, it wasn't really so much my fault, other than maybe missed a couple CS or miscalculations. For Worlds, probably one of the biggest examples where people think that I counterpicked myself. Odd One plays a huge part in the success of the Darius lane, because it's a kill lane. You want to send your jungler there. What happened was, I guess we miscommunicated. We ran on him. I pulled him in, and he flashed away. And I'm like, okay, good, we used his flash. Wait till it pulls up again. Odd One just straight up used exhaust. So when he straight up used exhaust, when you run away from Jace and I don't have pull up, Jace can hit us as much as he wants. What the idea is, you want to save exhaust so you can go on him again. And, you know, at that time, it was a really sad time, so I never said anything. But we fixed it in time. As for me compared to Shy, Shy knew how to play Jace very well. Jace was very strong at the time, and he gets jungle help at the proper time, and he knows what to do when. The difference is very, very little, but in the top lane, when it snowballs really, really hard. My biggest weakness as a top laner is probably like snowballing my lane very, very hard. At most, I'll do my job. And that's how I was made to play for TSM, just doing my job, not to do any big plays. When I try to make big plays and I get lots of kills, I either fail really hard or I do very well, and that's something that isn't really worth it. It's something I can only do when I know I can do it. And against Asian teams or Asian top laners and European top laners, like, they're the real deal. I can't abuse them like I can abuse certain other NA top laners and solo queue, or like I have to give people their certain respect. And when I go overboard, it makes me look really bad, because then I start getting snowballed. And after you die, there's like not much you can do unless your matchup's really good or if you get a jungle help. As for my last example, I could see against Wicked, the Jax versus Aurelia matchup is very heavily dependent on your jungler. So lots of these top laner matchups, it also depends on how much your jungler is going to camp top, how much your jungler is going to camp bottom. For our focal point, I think if Reginald succeeds, we will succeed no matter what, because he usually does well. He can carry hard. You know, everyone will make mistakes here and there, but I'm not that bothered by these focal points, because I know when I play against them, I'll be able to hold my own next time instead of trying to carry, because I have to give them their certain space. And I also know that now I have my champion pool. I don't have to play like 15 different champions for like a team comp. I'm going to do my job properly, and if we don't come out ahead, then, you know, I did what I could. And a perfect example for doing what I could was we played against Dignitas when Kiwi Kid had double buff, 2 kills on Singe. I went top 0-0 as Renekton. After 1v2ing bot, like, there's only so much I can do as Renekton. So when people like put me on that pedestal of like, oh, you're the reason why TSM is losing, that's never true, because you always lose as a team or you win as a team. And I don't see it as a one-man show, unless this one-man show is a player that's known to be good, and if the people laning against him mess up. If these players don't make any mistakes at all, there will be no one-man show, because everyone will be performing at an equal level. Lots of people don't realize this also, other than the players around them that make them good, but the players on the opposite team will make other players look good, depending on the level of the team. In North America, a lot of teams where I see like MacNoon and against like Shy or Shy against MacNoon, it plays a big part in the jungler. For the OGN finals, I saw MacNoon against Shy. MacNoon had Renekton, so he's able to play aggressive, so he has upper hand no matter what. MacNoon went past tower, and Shy had Cloud Templar jump on MacNoon alone, and it just happened that MacNoon's jungler was right there. And that messes up Shy like a lot, so there's a limit to how much Shy can do. So once again, that just proves that it's a team game, or it's 2 versus 2 top, or if we're just trying to focus on one player, it's just what the team decides.
Okay, for my final question, I wanted to just do like a fun hypothetical question. Okay. So this is going to be based on, basically it's going to get your perspective on other top players. So what I wanted to know was, if we imagine a scenario where We don't know the other players that'll be in each of the teams, but you, for some reason, maybe like the mafia or something, takes all your family and everyone hostage, and so you're going to play for everyone's. You have to pick the top lane player, any other top lane player in the world. It can be NA, Europe, Korea. Who would you pick? Like, who's the one guy this is the guy I'd trust to definitely win this game that everything's riding on? Who would you pick? And why?
There is a lot of candidates for that.
Who's first to your mind?
First to my mind? First to my mind, there's actually two. It would be Reaper or Expression. And the reason why I choose these over a lot of other players is that I've seen MacNoon choke a lot in games because emotions play in the part. I've seen Shy do pretty well, but I've seen him have mistakes. But when I look at Reaper or Expression, I see these, like, I don't see that many mistakes. And it could be that I don't see that many of their games, but the reason why I would choose Reaper is because a lot of players are like, oh, Azubu Blaze is not as scary anymore because they don't have Reaper. And I believe Reaper he innovates and he does what he wants. And that also is what makes him a great player. He's been playing since the start. And I see his strategies, and the reason why he's much scarier than most top lanes is he isn't afraid to try other stuff. Akali is a top laner that's never been used by really anyone, and he could just go top of Akali and just counterpick someone. He has the ability to master each champions very quick. There's lots of players, like, I can't really master Akali or Elise because, it's not my playstyle. Reaper is very versatile. Like, I never really see him play that bad. The games that he does play bad, there's a reason for it. The junglers camping him, or, like, he does a certain thing, like I haven't seen that much more of Reaper, but I've seen so many people talk so high of Reaper that, when all of my experiences of him add up and I see all these talk about him, other than, like, I know for a fact everyone thinks MacNoon's best top laner, Korea Shy's best top laner, Korea Expression, best top laner, Korea. But when I see, like, when I compare the mistakes and everything adds up, when it comes down to nerve and grit, I have never seen Reaper, like, mess up like that. And it could be because he has never been put on, like, a world stage as much. It could be a bunch of other things. There's so many good top laners, like Stanley. I play against him a lot. He innovates. Darian's up there, but I've seen him feed over and over, up to the point where it's like a Silso strategy, which is like a North American player who's very known for feeding a lot. I would put Wicked up there too. I haven't seen Wicked play that much lately, but I know Wicked is probably one of the best still. I don't think I've ever seen Wicked lose anyone as hard, and if he did lose, then there's a good reason. And the reason why these players are so good is because they do have mastery at these champions. Like, Wicked's really good at Aurelia, who's very OP back then. Wicked's very good at Renekton, Malphite. I don't know about nowadays because the meta's changed a lot, but if you were to ask me for the #1 player to take my spot at the best for today, I'd put my trust in Reaper because of his adaptability for this season.
Okay, so to wrap up then, do you have, like, final words? Do you have, like, sponsors you want to thank or say hello to someone or this sort of thing?
Okay. For final words, for a lot of things I've said, I'm going to go look back at the interview and be like, I could have said this, I could have said that. People are going to be like, oh, what about this guy? Or, oh, you're wrong. But I've always taken everything to consideration, and I forget a lot of things. So when people look at this interview, I want people to know that, my mind is not biased or one-sided. I've either forgot or didn't look at it. As for sponsors, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Qualcomm, the Snapdragon processor, Asus, Astro, Ventrilo, Corsair, Kingston, and Gunners.